Good afternoon. I am so glad to have all those that are in attendance. We got the upstairs people, we got people who are still eating downstairs, and we've got our YouTube and Facebook and Twitter audience, and we say welcome. Thank you for joining us again for our community family wellness weekend. And I'm excited. I felt like I got a lot of information last night, this morning. I enjoyed it. I saw some things about myself, but now we get a chance to go and talk with Dr. Aris Mosley. She is the what it says, District Medical Group Provider and Medical Director of the Valley Wise Health First Episode Center. She is board certified in both adult brain fog, psychiatry, and child adolescent psychiatry. Her goal when working with individuals that have a brain health disorder is to allow them to take an active role in their treatment and recovery through shared decision making. All right, so we're going to pray for Dr. Mosley, and then we're going to let her present to us for the glory of God. Would you agree in prayer with me? Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for Dr. Mosley traveling, Lord God. Lord, to be here with us, to share with us, oh God, to bring wellness, information, tools, tips, techniques, so that we can build better lives for ourselves and better families for your glory. Lord God, bless her every whit way. Bless the comments, oh God. Bless the questions. We want people to get the information that they need. Now we ask all of this in Jesus Christ's most precious name. We ask and believe. Amen. All right, so I'm asking that you would just welcome Dr. Mosley with a good hand clap and amen.
Okay, yep, oh yay, okay, it's working. Hi everyone, how are you? My name is Dr. Mosley. Can you guys hear me okay? Yes. Okay, so I always start every talk out by telling you guys how much I really don't like public speaking, and it makes me super nervous, and so my spirit's just gonna leave my body while I speak, and I'll return when I'm done. So I don't really know what I'm gonna say, so it's gonna be really interesting and should be fun. Okay, so yes, as it was said, I am double boarded in both adult and child and adolescent psychiatry. I am the medical director of the First Episode Center. And yeah, so I'm going to start off by telling you guys a little bit how I got called into medicine first. Ever since I think it was around 3 years old, my mom says I don't know, maybe 5. Well, I was young. I used to say I wanted to be a baby doctor, and I think that means that I wanted to be a pediatrician, but I never strayed. I just always knew that I wanted to be some type of physician, and that's what I did. That was my trajectory. When I went to college, I used to ask people, like, what's your major? And they would tell me, I'm like, ooh, that sounds cool. What do you do with that? Because I had no idea what other people did with their lives. I just knew I was going to be a doctor. So I went to medical school, and, you have to do different rotations and, pediatrics and internal medicine and surgery. And, I'd be like, ooh, this is really cool. And ooh, that sounds terrible. But when I got to psychiatry, I'd heard horror stories, right? And I was like, nope, I want to go in there. I want to do my 3 months and I want to get out. That's all I want to do. And that's actually what I told the hospital. Like when I got my keys, I'm like, I'm not really interested in this. I just want to do my time, basically. That didn't really bode well. They're like, oh, okay. But then I did it. And on the day that I turned in my keys after my 3 months, I cried. Because it was, and I'm getting like the goosies. It was so overwhelming for me because I got to see something different. I got to see past the stigma that we all think of when we think of psychiatric illnesses or care and things like that. And so when it came time to apply for residency, that's the next step after medical school, right? That's when you pick your specialty. So, excuse me, I thought I was going to be a cardiologist. I think the heart is like, it's pretty awesome. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do internal medicine and I'm going to do my fellowship in cardiology. So I only applied to internal medicine. And then my stepfather asked me about a month after sending out my applications, he's like, you haven't said anything about interviewing in psychiatry. And I was like, no, I didn't. He's like, why? And for me, my stepfather at the time, I held him in such a regard. I mean, I still do, but I knew from him and then the rest of my family, I would receive a lot of judgment if I chose to do psychiatry. And so I was like, nah, and he's like, in all the time that you did your rotations in medical school, you were the most happy during your psychiatric rotation. And so I said, okay. He's like, you need to call whoever you need to call and find out if it's too late. So I said, okay. So I called Lisa Chisholm and I was like, hey, it's Aris Mosley. Do you remember me? And she's like, of course I remember you. We've been waiting on your application. And I was like, really? Why? She said, because no one's ever cried when they turn their keys in. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So she says, look, I can't guarantee you anything. Submit your application by midnight tonight and then, we'll see what happens. So the way that the residency lottery works is you rank all of your hospitals that you interviewed at, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, and then the residency programs rate every single person that they interviewed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, and then there's this amazing magical algorithm that just pairs you. And it's called the match. And it's terrifying because if you don't pair and they don't pair perfectly, you end up with nothing. And so that's terrifying, right? So you're on pins and needles on Monday, you find out if you matched. I matched, but it doesn't tell you where. You have to wait till Friday to find out where you matched. So I didn't know, did I match it to internal medicine or did I match to psychiatry? Because I only applied to that one psych program. And so I matched, yay! And then on Friday, I'm like, ooh, what did I get? And so I got psychiatry. And I was like, that's so awesome. That's what I'm meant to do, right? The heart's still pretty stellar, don't get me wrong, but I found my calling. And I know that, if you ever heard me talk or you're one of my patients, they all know, I cry all the time. I'm very emotional, so I'm gonna cry. God knew that he needed to use me for this work because I was an unwilling participant at the beginning, right? I was like, I'm gonna do my time. And then he said, the joke, hold my beer, right? I'm gonna show you, girl, right? And so he showed, I'm gonna show you what I can do with your life. And he called me, and now I'm a psychiatrist, and I am doing the absolute best job in the world, and I feel bad for everyone who's not doing my job, because I have the best job in the world. And it's just incredible, because I get to walk an incredible path with my young people and their families. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the First Episode Center. That's the clinic that I work in. The First Episode Center is a clinic for young people who have had their first episode of psychosis from schizophrenia. Let me say this before I continue. The things I'm going to talk about today have the ability to trigger your bucket, okay? So if I say something that moves you, hits that midbrain, it's okay, take a moment. This has the potential to be heavy stuff, okay? And like we said, that the format of this is going to be different. I'm going to try to use general, easy words, not that you're dumb or anything like that. You guys are brilliant and fantastic, but we tend to get ahead of ourselves and get really excited about the work that we do. So if there's ever any point in this conversation, because that's all this is a conversation, if there's ever a point that you have a question or you need clarification, please stop me and ask me. That's how this works. That's how we all figure it out together. Is that okay? Okay. I'm dying. It's fine.
Just breathe, pause.
Where do I feel it? Feel it in my chest. I'm going to ride that wave to the shore. 1 second. Okay, I'm better. All right. So First Episode Center. So like I said, clinic for young people who've had their first episode of psychosis from schizophrenia. That's pretty heavy, right? Schizophrenia is typically a chronic illness, right? So what we do at the First Episode Center is we get in early with our young people. We meet them where they're at. We meet the families where they're at. And then we begin to provide healing in whatever way that they need. Is healing medicine? Yes, it is. With schizophrenia, it is. Is it time? Is it conversation? Is it just showing up? Yes, we provide all of that. So our clinic has been open for 6 years. I will have my 5-year anniversary at the end of this month. And it's the best thing ever. We have served probably around 150 young people, and they have gone, we have currently 90. Right? So the others, they have moved on. Some have moved out of town. Some have switched clinics because we're really far from a lot of people. But we have serviced about 150 young people and their families. And every single one of those young people is a gift to me because they teach me about myself. I learn about the brain. And I get to help them and their families through probably one of the hardest things that they will ever go through, right? So the work that we do at the First Episode Center is amazing. We are a full clinic, so I'm the psychiatrist, we have a medical assistant, we have a nurse. I'm literally walking through the office, like, don't forget anyone. We have a full-time therapist. We have a clinical coordinator who kind of takes care of everyone and is everyone's boss, who's also a licensed social worker. So he also is able to do therapy and actually specifically does a lot of therapy with the parents. And then we have 3 team specialists, which is another name for a case manager. We have a school and employment specialist, and we have a peer support specialist. So that individual has lived experience. So they can share the experience in a way that maybe I can't, because they've been to the hospital, they've been on the medication and things like that. And our peer support specialist is like, again, I feel bad for people who don't get to work with people like her because she's fantastic. And then we have 2 front office ladies that I actually say are the true psychiatrists in the office because our young people love them and they often get more information than I do. They'll be like, okay, let me tell you what's going on right now. And I'm like, okay, thank you. All right. And then we just keep it pushing, right? So we are a full clinic, and there are First Episode type centers all over the country. And I just feel like we need more of them. We are the only one currently. We're getting ready to open a second one. I'm from Phoenix, and we're getting ready to open a second one in town. It was supposed to open on Monday, but there was some hiccups in red tape as usual. So it's probably going to be another week. But based upon the numbers that they figured out when they were creating our center, they figured that we could help. We could help so many people that we could have 10 clinics at 90 members apiece. And we keep it at 90. That's our cap because, one, there's only one psychiatrist. That's one thing that we want to do is we want to keep one person so our young people aren't having to engage and retell their stories and things like that. And then our team specialists who are case managers, if we have 90, 30, 60, 90, they have 30 young people each. If you go to another clinic, they'll have 100 people on their caseload. But we need our team specialists to be able to know our young people, know their stories, and engage with them in a beautiful way. We have recently been recognized in 2022. We were honored. We were awarded the Healthcare Heroes Award from the Phoenix Business Journal. And then just last week, we were named a Center of Excellence by Mercy Care of Arizona. Mercy Care is one of our Medicaid insurance holders. So we were named, Center for Excellence. So it's pretty fantastic. Everyone okay? Okay. All right. So let's talk about brain health. So at the First Episode Center, we use a different vernacular. We use different words. We are trying to change the language about mental health so we can change the stigma. We need everyone to know that there is no shame in having a brain health condition, specifically a brain health condition that you did not ask for and you did not do anything to make it happen, right? So we call it a brain health condition instead of a mental illness. We call them team specialists. We don't call them case managers. We call our therapist a recovery coach. And of course, I'm the psychiatrist, but my young people can call me anything that they want. Some of them call me Aris. That's my first name. Some of them call me Miss Mosley. Some call me Doc. Some, whatever. I don't care. Just like call me anything. Just, maybe not the mean ones, but I'll respond to that too. Just depending on what kind of day you're having. So it's fine. But we're changing the face of behavioral health. So the importance of the brain. I think that, I don't know why the brain gets such a bad rap, right? Everyone seems to think that the brain's not everyone, I'm being very generalized, but like the brain's not that big of a deal and you should just like bootstrap it and you should make yourself feel better and it's fine, but it's not. Like your brain, I would say, is the most important organ in your body. It is the only organ. Now hold on, I might be lying to you. I'm going to say it. We're going to go with it. We're going to say it. It's the only organ that we cannot replace, right? So if I have kidney failure, if I find someone who's a match, I only need one, right? And if I can't find a match in the meantime, I can go through dialysis. If my liver is failing, all I need is a lobe. I just need a little piece, and then I can function. Even a heart. We can put in a fake heart. We can put in a pig heart. We can put someone else's heart into your chest. Science is awesome, but it hasn't quite figured out the brain. I don't know what that would look like. That would be weird. I don't know, but we haven't been able to do it. So the most important thing is our brain, because all of this only works, like I can do this awesome move because my brain allows me to. You are sitting upright in your seats right now because your brain allows you to. Most of us are breathing without realizing it. I'm not. I am having a hard time breathing right now because of my nerves. But most of you guys are breathing right now because there is a part in your brain that allows you to do that. So I will say it again. I believe that the brain is the most important organ in our body, and we need to learn to love on it. Our brain can get sick like any other part of the body. Why do people think the brain can't get sick? I don't know, but it can, right? So when the rest of our body gets sick, we might get a cold, we might get a fever, we get some body aches. When the brain gets sick, a lot of times it turns on the person. So what we do in terms of like schizophrenia, I'm just going to speak to that since that's my specialty, is that all schizophrenia is that it's a change in the way that the brain sees the world around it. It's interpreting the world around it in a very different way. So ultimately, the brain is lying to you. When you have anxiety, I don't know how many people in the room have had an anxiety attack. How many people in the room have had an anxiety attack or felt anxious, right? How many people during that anxiety attack have felt like they're dying? Okay, right? You're like, oh, I'm having a heart attack. I've literally had that. You're not dying. You can't die of an anxiety attack, but it sure the heck feels like it. Why? Because your brain is lying to you, right? So if that's the case, if your brain is lying to you, then why can't we treat it appropriately? Because it just means it's sick. So there's nothing wrong with anyone. Yesterday, Helene talked about like you just need like you need a little support. You're not broken. You didn't do anything wrong. You just need a little support sometimes. Is that with therapy? Is that with physical support from your loved ones? Is that from medication? Yes, all of those things sometimes, right? So at the First Episode Center, we talk a lot about the brain, the importance of the brain, and loving on the brain. So when someone's brain gets sick, let's say like in a psychotic episode, there's an actual inflammation that happens to the brain, kind of like a swelling. So, you like cut your hand, it gets red, it gets swollen. Same thing happens to the brain. The problem with the brain is that it takes the longest to heal out of any other part of your body. I always say that if you bite your tongue, right, you burn it, you bite it, it's like, oh, but then after like a little bit, you don't even realize it anymore. That's not how the brain works. The brain needs time. And I'm not saying an hour or a day. Like, the brain can take weeks, months, years to heal. So when that inflammation happens in the brain, we need to give the opportunity for healing. However, when you have an inflammatory process, there will always be cell death. So the cells, right? Like, our whole body is made up of cells. Cells will die. If you cut your hand, those cells that you cut, the skin, the tissue, it creates a scab. Okay, well, that's cell death. It's healing, but those cells in that particular area died. Same thing happens to the brain. Cells will die. The problem with the brain is that those cells can't regenerate the way that other parts of the body can. So when people are having episodes or experiences, it is very important to get in there early and begin the healing process so we can try to get around that cell death. Yes? That is a beautiful question. The question was, is it ever too late? Yes and no. I will say no, it's never too late, because I refuse to ever believe that there's not a chance at healing, right? I have seen just miracles happen in my young people that I've never given up on anyone, but I've thought, okay, this has been going on for so long and they're not healing in the way that I want. And I think that they're just going to be like this, whatever that is, it's going to be like that for a while, for a long time, chronically, long term. And then it's like they come alive. And I'm like, okay, I didn't do anything different. I haven't changed their meds. Nothing's changing. Time is what changed. So I will say, yes, so no, I'm going to say no, it's never too late. But unfortunately, for a lot of people, the longer you allow the brain to remain sick, the harder it is to bring them back, right? So I don't know what your homeless population is like here. I know what my homeless population is like in Phoenix. And unfortunately, a lot of those individuals that live on the streets have brain health conditions. And, they're typically older individuals. And I'll get to you, I see you. And so they're older individuals. And so their brains have been sick for a long time. So if I bring them into my hospital and I give them all of the really great medications, there's a large chance that they won't get better, unfortunately, because unfortunately the damage has been done. Yes.
Can you come to the mic, please? Sister Barbara.
Sister Barbara, stand up. I can hear you. Come on. I'll repeat the question.
Is it known what causes the initial inflammation?
Yes, beautiful question. The question was, is it known what causes the initial inflammation? So the answer, unfortunately, is no, we don't know. Okay? So specifically speaking for schizophrenia, it can be familial, right? It can be genetic. It can run in families. We do see that. Mental health conditions of all kinds run in families. Depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, ADHD, right? Schizophrenia, all of those can run in families. We also have individuals that, as far as we can tell, there's no known family history. Now, of course, we all do a really good job of hiding things in our family history. So there's always the chance that it's there and we just didn't know. But we do have young people, specifically in our clinic, that there's no known family history, and sometimes it just happens. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. One thing that I am seeing a lot of in my individuals who don't have a family history, and I can't figure out what caused this initial episode, what I do know, what I am seeing consistently, is that they have been smoking marijuana. Okay, now I'm going to tell you. Now you guys got me on my marijuana kick, so here we go. You're gonna get the marijuana lecture now. It's water. Okay. Marijuana is not the same marijuana from the 70s and 80s. okay? It's, my young people are like, oh, it's natural. Okay, let me tell you, there is nothing natural about what we are getting in dispensaries anymore, right? It is genetically created to give you the best high of your life, or whatever it is supposed to do, right? It is literally created in a lab for you. So the marijuana from the 70s and the 80s, the concentration of it, so the amount of THC, which is the product in it that gets you high, right? THC was probably anywhere between 5% and 15%. Okay? Get you a little high, get you a little munchies, kind of doze off, you're good. Okay? Fine, congratulations. However, what we are seeing now is the average THC level concentration, and I'm just going to speak to my young people, okay? Because I'm not going to speak for the whole world who smokes marijuana. 25 to 30%. Okay? The vape pens, everyone likes to smoke through the vape pens because they don't smell and it's easy. Those are 50% THC and higher. Most of my young people, and they know I'm going to ask them, flower, which is what you roll, smoke. I'm like, do you smoke flower or wax? Wax is what's in the pen. Flower or wax? And they'll be like, flower. And they know that when they go to the dispensary, they know they need to find out what is the concentration, so I know. Oh, Dr. Mosley, I'm smoking like 25 to 30%. Okay, fine. Oh, I'm vaping. What's the concentration? 90%. So 90%, from what I have seen, again, this is just based upon what I am seeing in our center, is like lighting these kids' brains on fire. It is literally causing their symptoms to come back. So let me just say that schizophrenia specifically is a rise in the dopamine in your brain, right? So dopamine is a very important chemical. We all have it. When you get to, dopamine is part of the brain, like it's part of your reward system, right? It's also important in body movement. If you guys have heard of Parkinson's disease, those individuals, their dopamine level is too low, okay? In schizophrenia, psychosis, the dopamine level is too high. Marijuana spikes the dopamine in your brain. So if your dopamine in your brain already tends to be on the higher side because you have a brain health condition like schizophrenia, the medicines I'm going to use is going to try to bring that dopamine down. But if you're smoking, especially at higher concentrations, you're spiking that dopamine back up. So now you're fighting what I'm trying to do with your brain, which is fine if that's what you want to do. But it's my job to provide the education to the individual so they can make the best decision that they feel is best for them. Does that make sense? Yes. Questions? Okay.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
I want to ask about dementia.
Okay.
Someone very close is dealing with dementia. And I understand that it's tricky. They haven't figured
Extremely.
Yeah, extremely tricky. They
Yes.
haven't figured it out.
Right.
Your thought process on, is it reversible or things that can help cope with it?
Okay, so that's a twofold question, right? Mm-hmm. So dementia, is it reversible, and there are things you can do to cope with it? The answer is, well, first let me say that dementia is one of the most devastating diseases of the brain, okay? Unfortunately, it's not reversible, right? There are medications right now, and I'm not a neurologist, okay? So this is just, be easy on me. Okay, so there are medications on the market currently that are to help to maybe slow the process down. Now, neurologists that I have spoken to when I was in training is that there is going to be a point where those medications just don't work anymore, right? And doctors will keep the people on the medication because it's not technically hurting them, but it's really hard to get an individual or their loved ones or their support to agree to stop those medicines, because you want hope that it's going to get better, if that makes sense. Now, how do you cope with it? Your relationship with God, a really great support system, good doctors, and that's it. It's not easy. I've seen it firsthand. I've actually worked in memory care before, and so I see how hard it is, how devastating, and I think that it's almost most devastating when the person knows that it's happening. They know that they're slipping away. That is so difficult, right? And then there's a point where they no longer remember.
So, with dementia, right, I do take classes for different things because I'm in the healthcare
Love that.
world. Um, I've seen you said one thing that was important: prayer, right? Living a good life and prayer, having people to pray.
Of course.
This particular individual have had dementia for maybe about 7 years, maybe 8.
Sure.
I think the onset was a stroke that's usually hits the brain. Haven't declined. So you have your base, right? She haven't declined, so I'm grateful for that. And what I'm trying to do is, and you say it's not reversible. A psychiatrist said, well, I talked to them, it's tricky, very tricky, extremely tricky, and it's not reversible. So what do you say if the person haven't declined? Would that be something?
So that's a good question. So again, not neurologist, but what I will say is that you said that the onset was from a stroke. So that is different. So different things can cause a decline in your cognitive process, right? Your cognition. So from a stroke means that so stroke is a clot in the brain, right? And so there's a very specific area, and so it's being impacted, right? But with dementia, it's like kind of in a different, it's not like one specific like dot. Like this part of your brain didn't get blood, right? That's what happens in a stroke. So it's different. So in terms of like, oh, they're not declining in the same way, well then that's beautiful. And that might be their baseline ongoing, which is fine, which is beautiful, which is praise, that's wonderful. So it's all nuanced with it. And that's, again, neurologists are brilliant. And because the brain is amazing. And it's kind of like space. It's like the uncharted territory. We are learning more every day. And the scientists who are doing the work are like my favorite human beings in the world because they're helping us to better understand something that we don't understand, but that it impacts so many people and your daily life. Good? Of course. Thank you for a beautiful question.
Thank you for your explanation of talking about the vaping and the marijuana use.
Yes.
I didn't realize that marijuana was different, because I've had family members say exactly what you said. It's natural.
Sure.
And I'm thinking, I don't think so. But I know of a family member. They experienced, I'm thinking, a traumatic event.
Sure.
And when I saw them next, they were not themselves.
Sure.
So by the end of the week, they were in a behavioral unit.
Okay.
And being diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder with bipolar.
Yes.
I think that's the term.
Yes, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar type.
And I'm thinking, okay, if they're smoking marijuana, so that medication is not helping them.
Kind of, maybe.
So I'm wondering, how do you get the person to stop smoking?
Okay, so if I can figure out how to do that, I would be so rich.
Yes.
So let me say this. One, I don't need the entire, THC, I don't want them coming for me, right? Like, they'll be like, what are you doing? The whole industry is ready to come for me. Because this is the thing. Marijuana is just like any other substance, okay? There are people who can smoke and they're fine. That's fine. That's wonderful. There are people who can vape the concentrations, the higher concentrations, and they're perfectly fine. Just like there are people who can have a 6-pack of beer and they're totally fine. But then someone has half a glass of wine and they're on the floor, right? So that the whole point is that everyone is different. Everyone's brain and body is going to respond to things differently. There's some people who get a high from cigarettes. Okay, that's fine. So what I'm saying is that I don't want people to be like, oh, marijuana's bad. I'm just speaking for there are people's brains who are more sensitive to substances. And I think that for those individuals, it has the potential to have a negative impact, if that makes sense. Yes. Now, in terms of trauma, we learned a lot about trauma this weekend. And trauma absolutely can look like other things. Trauma can cause psychosis, right? And so what I heard yesterday was that a history is so important, right? And the little girl who had the surgery when she was a newborn, and her body held that trauma, and it looked like ADHD. Did I get that right? Okay. So you have that. So trauma can look like a lot of things. So I heard you say that the individual maybe had a traumatic event, they're smoking, and they've been diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, bipolar type, which is ultimately bipolar disorder, okay? And maybe they have that. Maybe they have schizoaffective disorder, maybe they don't. Maybe it's their trauma. So again, I'm gonna say the same exact thing. History is so important, and I think that for a lot of us, for our families, we don't want to tell you our history. We don't want to admit maybe the dark, scary, ugly, embarrassing things that happen in our families. But when we bring light into the dark, that's when healing begins, right? So I have been like, I don't understand, like with members before, I'd be like, I really don't understand what's going on. This is so weird, like what is going on? And then when finally myself, the family, the young person have developed a rapport in which they trust me, then I start to get the other answers, and now I have a full picture, and then that's when the true, really great healing can begin. Because yeah, maybe your son or daughter has schizophrenia, but also they have a lot of trauma. And so now I have to do my part, and then my therapist has got to get to that trauma piece so we can begin to heal. Because people who have severe mental illness, and I'm going to talk to you right now about what severe mental illness is, but something like schizophrenia is severe mental illness. 50% or so, that's a rough number, of people who have that diagnosis have additional brain health conditions like anxiety, like trauma, like ADHD, depression, that kind of stuff. So these things go hand in hand. Yes. So, no.
Could you repeat the question?
Yes, the question was, is there a cure for bipolar disorder? Currently, as far as I know, there is not a cure for bipolar disorder. But that doesn't mean that you can't live a full, healthy life. There's no cure for type 1 diabetes, but it's not the end of the world if you get it. Yeah, it's not great, you can't eat all the things that you want to do, and you have to watch your blood sugars and take your insulin and blah, blah, right? But it's not the end of the world. The same thing with bipolar disorder, the same thing with any brain health condition. There is no cure, but there are beautiful and wonderful treatments that can allow a person to live a beautiful life. I tell my young people all the time, your brain health condition, your diagnosis is absolutely not an excuse to stop living. I'm like, we don't do that, right? I'm gonna give you a month or two to kind of get yourself together. Like, okay, this is happening, and okay, but then we're gonna get to work. We're getting back to school. We're getting back to work. And if you can't tolerate that, then baby, we're gonna go volunteer somewhere. We're gonna do something to get our life back, because we don't stop just because a diagnosis is present. Okay? Okay, so severe mental illness. So I'm literally just gonna read you the definition that I wrote down. Severe mental illness is an illness that causes functional impairment that significantly impacts or limits one or more major life activities, right? So that an SMI, severe mental illness diagnosis, so that can be schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, borderline personality disorder, in some cases anxiety disorder. It's so significant that it's having an impact in like one area of your life, at least one area. Like, you know, my brain health condition is so significant when it's not being treated that I can't work. I can't go to school. I can't take care of my kids, something like that, okay? So I'm going to give you some statistics. So when I give these statistics, I'm going to tell you what year these statistics are for, because, you know, in science and research, like you look back like a few years, because I can't tell you what happened in 2023 because we're not done with 2023 yet, right? Okay, so, right? Yeah. Got me questioning myself. Okay, so in 2021, 14.1 million U.S. individuals, so individuals that live in the United States, had an SMI diagnosis. So 14.1 million adults have a severe mental illness. So that's a big number, right? And I gave that number because if I tell you, well, only 5.5% of adults have that. That 5.5 is kind of a small number, right? But when you actually look at the number, 14.1 million people have a severe mental illness. 9.1 million of those individuals actually received services in 2021. So services mean they were seeing someone receiving treatment of some kind, okay? Now, so that's a severe mental illness. Then we can talk about any mental illness. And so that's like the anxiety, the ADHD, and things like that. So an estimated, again, this is 2021, an estimated 49.5% of adults in the United States in that year had a mental health disorder. So nearly half of the US population has a mental health disorder, okay? So the reason why I want to give you these numbers is because, again, there's so much shame and stigma attached to mental health, but when you like pull back the curtain and look at it for what it is, it's like, well, you're not alone. Half of America has it, so it's fine, right? Like, so it's okay. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to ask for help. Like, I mean, I don't care if 2 people had it, you should be asking for help. But when I tell you that half of the US has something that they're dealing with, it's something that we need to start paying attention to. Okay? Now, I'm gonna talk right now about suicide. So this is like trigger warning, okay? So we're gonna see where you feel it. We're gonna write it, okay? Here we go. 2020, these are just statistics. 45,900 people ended their own life. That is 2 times the number of homicides in the United States for that year. So more people chose to take their life. I say choose, and I use that very loosely, because at the time that someone does that, they don't feel that they have a choice. That is so important to understand. Okay? People who get there, they are hurting in such an unbelievable way. Okay? Okay, so I'm going to give you age ranges. This is hard for me to read. Kids ages 10 to 14 years old and young people ages 25 to 34, suicide was the second leading cause of death in that year. They had only came second to an accident. Okay, so kids are really struggling. Ages 15 to 24, it's the third leading cause of death, and that's secondary to unintentional injury, so accident or homicide. In ages 35 to 44, and this is in 2020, it's the 4th leading cause of death, and that's secondary to accident, homicide, and then cancer. And I I know that those are very heavy numbers, and I didn't really think that. I mean, I wrote these down on my card. This is my handwriting, and I didn't have that visceral reaction when I wrote it down. But I don't know, like reading it here now, I think because I child and adolescent psychiatrist on the weekends. I cover our inpatient adolescent unit, so it's a unit for 13 to 17-year-olds that need psychiatric help. And so I'm meeting with these kids and I'm hearing their stories and I'm talking to them about what it is that they were going through that led them to want to harm themselves. And so I just, I had a trigger warning for myself. I did. Look at me. Oh my goodness. Okay, so rates of suicide are higher for men. And in terms of race, it goes Native American or indigenous individuals, Caucasian, Asian or Pacific Islander, they're in the same group, Black people, and Hispanic people. So Hispanics are lowest and Native Americans are the highest. Yes.
Hello there.
Hi.
All right. Thank you for this.
Okay.
First of all, I wanted to say thank you for dealing with marijuana, directly. Not only psychologically, but just some physiologically, metabolically. Since it's been approved and it's out there, science is actually being forced to talk about it more.
Sure.
And put the data out.
Yeah.
So hang on to your hats. I've seen some data. You're going to be really blown away by what marijuana is doing to the next generations that
Sure.
are coming up. So I appreciate you, bringing it out straightforward. Do you see, I heard your numbers here. You hear all the time, anecdotally mostly, but then I do see some data, but you see most of the time, hey, COVID did a number.
Yes.
Right? What are you seeing, real stats or even anecdotally, to some of those numbers
Sure.
that you talked about?
Sure, that's a wonderful question. So, yeah, COVID was rough. It was tough. I tell my young people all the time, like, they can ask me anything they want. And my life is an open book, secondary to my social security number, which I'm sure they could find on the internet if they looked really hard. But they can ask me anything. So my young people know, so I have no problem telling you guys. COVID was very hard for me, right? It made me so anxious, so overwhelmed, and so depressed that I went to my own primary care and said, I need an antidepressant to help me with my depression and anxiety, please. And so he put me on an antidepressant. Antidepressants can treat both depression and anxiety and a host of other things, but those two things specifically. And then I started doing weekly therapy. And I've been in weekly therapy every Friday at noon with my therapist. So I know, so anecdotally, yes, 1,000%. When I looked at the numbers, these numbers were still so high in terms of, and I think that we're still gathering information on that, but it looked like it was a difference of like a few percentage point increase. So it was still very significant, very present prior to COVID. COVID just like ramped it up. And I think that what I can also say is that the numbers I'm giving you are wrong because they're actually higher, because those are the people that were able to give that information. So those numbers are actually higher. Okay, so go ahead. Go ahead.
All right, 2 questions.
Yes.
This one says, the question is, I'm wondering why does brain disease, schizophrenia, manifest itself in young people?
Oh, yes.
Or what is the average age at diagnosis and why?
Yes, come through. That's what I was going to talk about. Okay, so schizophrenia, it starts young, typically. It's younger in men than it is in women. So my clinic specifically is for young people ages 15 to 25. Okay, it typically presents, I'm going to speak for young men first, it typically presents in young men in college age. So they went away to college or stayed in college or graduated from high school and started working, and they were doing fine and they were normal, whatever normal is, right? And then all of a sudden they changed. Things changed. That's the typical presentation that we see. So I would say that most of my, because I have more young men in my clinic than I do young ladies, but I would say that my young men typically present to me at around 19, 20, 21. My young ladies typically present to me around 23, 24, 25. They can go up to like 28. But that's not hard and fast rules, right? So will a 12-year-old have schizophrenia? Yes, I'm sure it happens, but it's not typical, right? Like, I'm going to expect a 12-year-old that presents with like true schizophrenia to be what I call, or we call, being genetically loaded, meaning mom and dad both have schizophrenia, right? I'm not going to really see too often a 12-year-old with no known family history, right? I'm not going to typically see a 45-year-old man show up with first episode of psychosis. If you show up with 45 years old and you're a gentleman and it's your first episode of psychosis, I want the rest of the story. Something else is going on. Now, let me tell you, you can have psychosis from anything. You can become psychotic from not sleeping. You can become psychotic from depression. There are medications that can induce psychosis, right? So that's why the whole story is important. You don't get to just say, well, they're hearing voices, so they have schizophrenia. No. There's a whole story that needs to be told. Okay. Was there another question? Oh, did that answer the question for the person? If it didn't, okay.
Okay, and so you mentioned first episode, and my question regarding that is, what does a first episode look like?
Beautiful.
I ask that because maybe you're looking at your child's behavior,
Yes.
and you're like, they always acting out, they're always this, they always, and
Sure.
sometimes you may attribute it to, he's just always been difficult, she's
Sure.
just always been a loner. How are you as a parent or a friend be able to tell this is not just, them having trouble in school, this is a first episode?
Sure. So when I receive referrals to our clinic, the first thing I look for is evidence of a prodrome. And a prodrome is the period of time that led up to that first episode of psychosis. So people who have schizophrenia, they don't go to bed on Wednesday and wake up on Thursday psychotic. It literally does not work like that. If that happened, I want to know the rest of the story. Either you have like viral meningitis, or you smoke some, or like something else is going on. You don't just wake up psychotic. So there's a prodrome. Prodrome is typically a few months to 6 months, and it is a change in the presentation, and it often gets mistaken appropriately for depression. The individual, the young person, begins to withdraw a little bit. They're a little bit more quiet. And I mean, don't go freaking out. If your kid gets quiet on you, like, don't be like, oh, prodrome. Like, no, like, because I know some of you are like, okay, like, let's breathe. The likelihood, so let me tell you, the frequency of schizophrenia in the community is about 1.2% of the population, okay? So it's most likely not. So let me say that. But, and again, it's over time. So they begin to kind of withdraw. They're not taking care of what we call the ADLs. So they're not showering, they're not eating. There is a change. Say I have schizophrenia, right? And you can see that I'm pretty ridiculous. I'm just like, ah, right? But then all of a sudden I'm like, hey guys, ah. And then all of a sudden I'm like, hi, I'm just gonna go to my room, or I'm actually just not gonna talk to you. So, like, that is a stark difference from what you're seeing, right? That looks like depression. I should be evaluated for depression before I'm evaluated for schizophrenia. So a lot of parents get upset. They're like, they're like, I don't understand. Like, and they're literally yelling at me, okay? Like, I don't understand. Like, that doctor was terrible. They diagnosed my kid with depression and it was schizophrenia. And I'm like, we should never jump to schizophrenia in our minds. You know what I mean? Like, it was the appropriate approach. Okay, so that's what a prodrome looks like. And then it's like, and the way that I describe a prodrome is like the brain is slowly going offline, right? It's like going to sleep. And then all of a sudden it ramps up. And then all of a sudden the psychotic episode happens. All of a sudden I have schizophrenia, I am hearing voices in my head that are as clear as you hear my voice. I hear voices, and they're talking to me. Now, I have some young people, their voices are quite nice. Like, their voices are like, you did great today. One of my young people, she hears the voice of God and Jesus every single day. And I'm like, dang, that's the kind of, like, if you have to have schizophrenia, like, that's the kind of have, right? Like, good morning, you're blessed, you're gonna have a beautiful day, let's pray together. And I'm like, oh, it's amazing. That's not how it always was for her, okay? Most of the time, it's like a running commentary on what you're doing. Can you imagine how annoying that would be if someone was constantly like walking by you, like, where are you going? You're going over there right now? Yeah, you're gonna pick that up? I can't believe you just did that. What? Hurry up, go to the bathroom, your mom's talking to you. Don't you hear her talking to you? Are you gonna answer her? What are you gonna do, huh? What are you gonna do? She's against you. You know that, right? Can you imagine what that feels like? That's what individuals with schizophrenia go through. They can become paranoid. Their parents are against them. The CIA is after them. The cartel is like looking at their house. That they know that their neighbors can hear them talking through the walls. There's paranoia. Then there's delusions. I'm Kim Kardashian's best friend. And I need to get on this plane right now because Kim Kardashian wants me to come to her all-white party with Ye. So it's great. Like, what? Like, we all know that you're not Aris, you're not Kim Kardashian's best friend. But that's what my brain is telling me. Do you see how my brain is lying to me? Okay. And then so those are like what we call positive symptoms. They're not like good symptoms, but they're the presence of voices, the presence of delusions, the presence of paranoia. Then you have the negative symptoms. They're not bad symptoms. They're all bad in my opinion, but that's not the bad. It's the lack of, right? So it's the flat affect. Normally I'm like, hey guys, how are you? It's great to see you. And then all of a sudden I'm like this. Everything's fine. I'm great. Yep. Had the best day ever. That doesn't match what I'm saying, right? Okay. So flat affect, monotone voice, no intonation, no change in my voice. I'm just talking like this. And then there's paucity. Yes. I'm hungry. Do you see how there's paucity there? Yeah. So it's the lack of, it's not there. Concrete thought process, which is, I'm trying to give you guys examples of like my actual members. I'd be like, oh, it's a beautiful day outside. And they're like, it's 118 degrees. I know, but it's beautiful. Like the sun's out and it's monsoon season, so it's been kind of muggy, but it's a really beautiful day. It's 118 degrees out there. They're unable to see outside. And it actually looks like autism. Okay, so we oftentimes call it autistic features. They don't have autism. It just kind of looks like it in that moment. Does that make sense? So that's what schizophrenia looks like. Questions? Thoughts? Concerns? That's my favorite question for my patients. Yes, you again. Oh my gosh. What? Oh, sir, wait, let me sit down. Oh my God. What?
I just asked her, was it questions and answers, right?
Oh God, I'm ready. Go.
So, schizophrenia, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm going to share an experience. I work with the mentally challenged.
Yes.
But in my own personal life, I've had to help someone. I got a call from when I was in California,
Yeah.
that someone in Chicago, close to me, very close to me, had been diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Yes.
The question is going to be probably a twofold again.
See, why do you guys let him come to the microphone? Yeah. Oh, no.
How important is it to make sure that you get the right diagnosis?
Okay.
That-
Do you want to stop there? Because that's a good one.
Mhm.
No, you want to keep going. Okay, go.
This particular individual
Uh-huh.
at the age of about 57, how likely is you to have schizophrenia
Yeah.
or be diagnosed at that age?
57.
At 57,
Extremely rare.
right? So in the process of me caring for this individual,
Yes.
back and forth with the doctors and psychiatrists,
Yes.
I thought it was alcohol induced because
Which
the
it could
history
happen.
is important.
Yes.
And I gave them the history, so
Yes.
that was reversed.
Okay.
But I saw all the signs from the medicine
Yes.
because I believe it was the wrong diagnosis
I love
of
that.
somebody thinking that
Yes.
somebody is at the window. I'm looking at the individual,
Right.
and somebody is attacking them. So it's very important
Yes.
to get second
Yes.
opinion. That's
Yes.
my
Yes.
my
So
question.
collateral's so important, right? So if that woman had come to me and I was in the hospital and she's psychotic and she's having these symptoms of psychosis, I would probably diagnose her with schizophrenia. Why? Because I don't know that she didn't have schizophrenia before. I don't know her story, right? But if family, friends, someone is able to come and be like, no, literally this has never happened. This is out of nowhere. Okay, now we need the rest of the story. Does that make sense? So yes. Yes. I love that for you.
So my question is about some background around somebody with this diagnosis. Would you say that multiple concussions and underlying anxiety
Sure.
without any family history, what would you say that anything, what I'm saying is a structural,
Right.
a concussion, would that contribute, or is that something that is a different part of the brain?
So that's a very good question, and I have no problem saying I don't know. Okay? And the reason why I say that is because concussions, we're just now starting to really understand the impact of those physical assaults on the brain. So so what I'm going to say is that I wouldn't think it's schizophrenia, but that doesn't mean it's not psychosis, right? So perhaps now if we're just talking about the concussions piece, right? The damage has been done to a certain part of the brain and it has caused those symptoms, right? But I don't know that a concussion, and again, I'm not a neurologist, but I don't know that a concussion can impact the dopamine. And what I will say about the dopamine, right, because I'm really talking about dopamine today, is that is our best working theory for schizophrenia. There is no test, like people are like, scan my brain, I'll prove I don't have schizophrenia. And I'm like, I wish I could scan your brain. Or come on, draw my blood. I'm like, okay, there's no dopamine test yet, right? Like we don't have that yet. I believe it's coming. Like I know actual researchers that are working on trying to develop a blood test versus like a urine test to see if someone has schizophrenia. We're still learning, right? So I think that that's coming. What I will say is that anxiety can cause psychosis. However, once you treat the anxiety, the psychosis is supposed to stop, if that makes sense. Okay.
Can I just add this? To her point about learning about the brain, concussion, for example, we did this also, just released a blood test a little over a year ago to help with the diagnosis of concussion. There's a lot not known. This is the first. The Department of Defense funded us to develop a test. NFL wants it, of course, all
absolutely.
the military wants it. But this is the first time we were able to, because we were able to identify two proteins that get released when nerves are damaged. The first time we're able to develop a blood test for concussion. So there's a long way to go.
Yeah, and I think that that's beautiful. I love that you spoke about proteins, right? Because like our body is made of proteins, right? So if the cells break open, they're going to spill proteins out, right? So I love that. Ooh, I'm excited. Okay. Ooh, I just got all science nerdy. Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. I failed
You
to.
too?
Yes. See, I got up here and got nervous and
Don't be
didn't-
nervous. Look at
didn't-
how weird I am. There's nothing to be. I am.
You're not weird.
Oh, I'm weird. Have you met me? Look at me. I am like sucking this water down. Like
That's good.
I'm shaking. Go ahead. Go ahead. See, there's nothing to be nervous about.
What I forgot to say and about this individual, it's like over a weekend they became with this diagnosis. So, family history is a family history of depression
Yes.
and bipolar disorder.
Okay.
That's in the history.
Okay.
But prior to this weekend, this person was functioning well, happy.
Perfect.
And when I saw them on Monday, they had this nuances in voice, and they're speaking. They went from whispering to screaming,
Yes.
threw themselves down on the floor,
Yes.
and was like, close the windows, close the blinds. So I thought to myself, since they mentioned that marijuana took place at this event they were at on the
Sure.
weekend, could something have been that was supposed to be my question.
Yes.
Could something have been chemically induced into the marijuana to trigger, now you have a new diagnosis of this schizoaffective disorder, and you
Sure.
hear voices that curse you.
So two things.
Yes.
One, bipolar disorder, because I said schizoaffective disorder, bipolar type is in essence bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder, you can go to sleep on Wednesday and wake up Thursday psychotic. That does not happen in schizophrenia, because that is going to be what we call a manic episode with psychosis. That can happen on a dime. Okay? Now you're asking me, could the marijuana be laced ultimately? Yes. So this is why I actually tell my young people. We talk a lot about like mitigating the risk, right? So I don't want you to smoke marijuana, but if you're like bent on it, let's talk about how we can do that the safest way possible. The safest way possible for me is that you don't ever buy your weed from the street. Okay? Because we don't know, right? Because we have young people or older people, I guess it doesn't matter. We have human beings, let me put it that way. We have human beings overdosing on marijuana. How? Because they're overdosing on fentanyl. Okay? The dealers don't want to harm you. You're how they're making money. They don't want that to happen. However, unfortunately, or whatever, when they are sorting their product on the table, they're not sorting one product at a time. They're sorting different products, right? So I have my flour over here, I'm bagging it up, but yesterday I had been sorting my fentanyl pills. And so now it just takes a little dot, and that got on your marijuana, you smoked it, and now you've overdosed. Okay? So I tell my young people, if you smoke, please get it from the dispensary. But then also, if you get it from the dispensary, can you make sure that the concentration is lower? My sweet spot, I guess, if I have to have one, is like, can we not go over 25% THC content? Now, do I have young people that smoke 25% and they're like, woo, yes. And also, let me just say, is that you can smoke marijuana, have symptoms of psychosis, and be okay, right? Like, you've heard people say they smoke, and they're like, ooh, I get really paranoid when I smoke. Well, you know why? It's because the dopamine went up in your brain, but your brain is not super sensitive to marijuana, or it wasn't because the concentrations weren't that high. And then when that dopamine level comes back down, you're fine, right? So yeah, there's people who get paranoid when they smoke weed, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're psychotic. It just means that you bumped your dopamine, and now your dopamine's coming back down. But people who have brains that are a little bit more sensitive, they bump that dopamine, and then it just stays up there. And then we gotta bring it down.
I'm trying to remember everything because I'm nervous, so I started
Don't,
writing it down.
didn't I just tell you not to be nervous?
I'm super nervous. Okay, so can a person see symptoms in their cells and know something is wrong?
Okay, let me answer that really quickly. Can someone see? Yes, absolutely. So it's not, most people don't know. Start over. See, why are you nervous? I can't even speak right. And like, okay, so let me start over. Okay. When a person is experiencing symptoms of psychosis, they don't always recognize it because what they are experiencing is 100% real to them. Okay, so I always give this example. If these weren't frosted windows, if we look out the window and the sky was blue, right? We'd all look out the window and the sky is blue. And I'm like, oh, the sky is blue. But then my patient, Larry, I don't have a patient, Larry is like, no, the sky is red. And I'm like, no, it's blue. And Larry's like, no, it's red. Well, now why am I even going to fight with Larry? Because Larry's brain is telling him it's red. So you know what? It's red to him. But there are people who have insight. It doesn't typically happen the first go round, right? Because their brain is just so sick and scrambled that they don't know what's going on. And then oftentimes they don't even have memory of the episode. So then because when they get better and then I'm talking about all the things that happened, they're like, that didn't happen. And I'm like, no, really, it did. They're like, no, it didn't. And then unfortunately or fortunately, their parents are like, I actually recorded you while you were doing this and this is what you looked like. And then they're devastated because there's proof, right? The second episode, if they have it, they know because they know what they typically feel like. And then all of a sudden the voices, they're there. And then they know. Insight doesn't always happen. Some people never gain insight. And some people have it pretty quickly. It just is based on the person.
So is insight like being high functioning?
Very good question. So insight is just knowing that you're experiencing it. I do typically think that people who are higher functioning in terms of like, I mean, I guess if we're just gonna go like IQ, like people who have a higher IQ tend to have better insight. But the reason why they have, me personally think they have better insight is because they have a better understanding and they have in terms of using the words for their experience. It doesn't mean that someone's not smart, but if you just don't have words to put to what your experience is, it's gonna make it a little bit more difficult. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Can a person get worse with ignoring their psychosis, and especially if they have like people around them, especially like in the Black community, like you know they tell you, oh, nothing's wrong with you, just need to go get some sleep or go pray about it, you know, like, and something really be wrong with them, and like you said, the insight part, like they see it. Can they become worse, or can they just be high functioning and live life?
Yeah, so the answer, that was a beautiful question. So if you guys didn't hear, the question is like, if someone is having an episode of psychosis, will it get worse if you just kind of ignore it, especially if you have people around you kind of be like, yeah, it's fine, bootstrap it, you're fine, get some sleep, drink some water, you're good, just say your prayers and you'll be okay, right? So the thing is that with schizophrenia specifically, it is typically a chronic condition. So if the person is not receiving treatment in terms of medications, they typically are not going to get better. Okay, because the dopamine's high, and so they're not going to get better, and so that inflammatory process is just getting worse and worse and worse, and it's just kind of like there. So that's not great. That is not to be said. So people who have like bipolar disorder and things like that, or depression, they can kind of cycle out of their episodes sometimes without treatment. Or they'll just have like a low hum, like they'll be like really intense symptoms and then it'll just be like a slow burn, but they're able to like manage. That's not typically how it is with schizophrenia, but that is how it happens with other brain health conditions like anxiety, right? If you've ever had anxiety, there's some people who are anxious all the time and they're just like, ugh, right? But there's other people like me, when I had my anxiety, like it would just be like white knuckling it, and then I'd be like, okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, you know, and then the next thing it's like, oh, it's back. So it can like cycle itself through. Yeah, so I think that schizophrenia typically tends to be the outlier in not being able to like undo itself, if that makes sense. Okay. Did I answer your questions?
Wondering if you can touch on, and you sort of touched on it briefly, bipolar disorder.
Sure.
And I was wondering how marijuana affects that.
Okay, so we do have some young people in our clinic who have bipolar disorder because that mania with psychosis or even depressive episode with psychosis looks like schizophrenia. So especially when I say young people, I'm so sorry, it's because I work with young people, humans who are having an episode and they go into the hospital and say they're agreeable to take medication and they get like some good meds, right? So those mood symptoms, either mania, which is like, mania is the opposite of depression, right? You know what depression looks like, right? We kind of talked about it. And mania is like the opposite, like they're talking really fast and like their thoughts are going so fast and they're like, oh my God, let's go. Yeah, we're going to go do this. And yeah, da, 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 da. And I actually had a patient in the hospital who bought 4 Lamborghinis. He must have had really good credit. I don't know anything about that like that. I mean, I'm working on my score right now. It's fine. So bought 4 Lamborghinis during a manic episode, just in different colors. But it's this like increased need to spend. Or like you go and you're like gambling, like just gamble all your money away, just, you know. And so one of my patients actually, she told me that she knows when her mania is kind of happening because she drives a motorcycle and she's typically a safe motorcycle driver, helmet, you know, but she's now riding without her helmet and she's like, I don't care, I'm fine. Like, and she's going well over 100 miles per hour. And she's just like, it's that she's getting sped up and her brain is getting so sped up that her motorcycle's getting sped up. So she's like, oh, okay, I gotta like bring it down, talk to my doctor, figure out some stuff. So anyway, you go into the hospital, you get some good meds, those mood symptoms melt away first. The depressive symptoms, the mania symptoms, but then the psychosis is still there. So now you just look like you have schizophrenia. So we do have young people in our clinic who have schizophrenia. Okay, I'm so sorry. What was the question? Look at, I'm just like, la, 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 la. And then I'm like, bleh. Okay, so where are you? Go ahead. What do you want to know about it? Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm back. Okay, we're back. Okay, how does marijuana affect it? So same way. So that was the whole point of me saying is that I do have young people in my clinic who have bipolar disorder, and it's not like, oh, you don't have schizophrenia, you got to go, and we like give them the boot. No, like once you're ours, and I love you, and I want to help your brain, right? And so some of them do smoke marijuana, and I've seen very similar patterns that when they smoke, their symptoms tend to kick up, and they will flip themselves into a manic episode. So what I can say about bipolar disorder is that, let me say this about all brain health conditions. You can be on really good medicine, and with the perfect storm, your symptoms will come back. Like, you're doing good, everything's fine, you're doing what you need to do, and all of a sudden your symptoms are back because you're going through a bad breakup, or there's a lot of stress at work, or your kids are bananas and they are stressing you out, right? That's me, my 5-year-old. Oh my goodness. Anyway, so you can kick yourself up into an episode just from stressors, even though you're on good meds, right? So I'll have young people who are doing well. I'm going to speak to my bipolar young people. They're doing really well. They're on their meds, but then they're smoking marijuana, and then all of a sudden they're flipped into the most intense manic episode. And those young people, actually, I end up having to hospitalize because they're just not safe at that point. They're not going to hurt anyone. So let me say this. People with brain health conditions, they are such as like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, they are more likely to harm themselves than to harm other people. Okay, so that stigma of them being dangerous, it's typically them being dangerous to themselves. Okay, but they're just not safe because like they're driving 100 miles per hour, right? So they're just like not safe. So I end up having to put them back in the hospital, and then it's like forever to get them better because they're just it's wild to watch because you're like, how But then it just brings me back. It's like, we need to have the most respect for the brain. We need to love on our brains in the most beautiful of ways, because when it gets sick, it just flips. And again, doesn't mean the person's broken, doesn't mean they're bad or they did anything wrong. It just means that it happened. Just like kids get cancer. Sucks, sorry, but it happens. It's not great. And I will never tell my young people that they can't get better. I will never tell them that certain things can't help. Prayer 1,000% helps. I will never tell someone not to pray. I will encourage them to. If they allow me to, I will pray with them. Which is interesting because, like, when you work for a big hospital system, you're not supposed to talk about that kind of stuff. But, like, you know how you, like, just know and you, like, get that wink and a smile and you're like, and they're like, oh, yeah, you're like me. And I'm like, yeah, you want to pray? And they're like, yeah. So it's fine. But it's so important. It's like I tell my young people, whatever works for you. I mean, still take the medicine. But whatever works for you in terms of, like, comforting your spirit and making it just a little bit easier, that's the most important thing. I just want to share this one story of one of my young people. I'll probably cry because I just saw her on Thursday and I bawled my eye. I mean, boo-hooed with her. So she's been with the clinic for 6 years. I've been with her for 5. She is brilliant. She is an accountant. She makes like over $150,000 a year. So, and I say this, I feel really bad saying this, but like when my young people have big things like that going on, it makes me want to work harder because I'm like, I really have to get you back to where you were. Because imagine that you are a doctor, you're an accountant, you're, like, and then I tell you you can't do that anymore. Unacceptable. Like, it's not acceptable. I don't care if you work at the Boys and Girls Club. Like, you want to get back to that? It's unacceptable for me not to get you back to where you want to be. Anyway, so she's an accountant, and when I met her, she was actually in the hospital, and her brother had just gone to her apartment, and he had found her walking around her apartment complex, just very confused, didn't have her clothing on, and she was just not well, right? So she went into the hospital, we got her on meds, and she did well on those meds. And then one day they just stopped working, like slowly. It was like this slow burn. And I was like, what is going on? So we increased the dose of her medicine. And she's just getting sicker. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to increase it again. So I went from 117 to 156 to 234. 234 is the highest. And I'm like, okay, she's really, really sick. She's not doing okay. She's working, but I don't know how, because she's like a shell. She's literally not there. And she can't shower herself. Her mother's having to wash her hair for her. And I'm just like, what do I do? So then I changed her medicine to a pretty heavy medicine, and it worked. But then 6 months later, she developed this horrible side effect that if I didn't fix it, if I didn't stop the medicine like this, then those side effects would have been with her for the rest of her life. So I'm like, okay, I got to stop it. So I took her off of that, and I'm freaking out because I'm like, okay, so like this medication she did well, and now it stopped working. And then I put her on this medication, and now she's having side effects. So I can go to this other medication, which I consider like a soft approach, like it's like really gentle. And I'm like, there's no way this is going to work. How is the soft approach going to work when the two like heavier hitters didn't work? So I prayed. And this is my young lady who hears the voice of God and Jesus, right? And so she and I both, we prayed, and it's okay. And then all of a sudden, she's like, better. Like, better than she's ever been? Like, how is that possible? Like, I had like one eye open, one eye closed, because I'm like, oh, is this gonna last? And she's just like killing it. Better than she ever was before. And I have no answer for it. What's that called? Okay, right? So we were crying this week because she's moving out of state. And she wrote me this beautiful card, and she said, "Thank you for helping me to fly again and get back to who I was meant to be." And I just bawled because she did the hard work. She trusted me with her brain. She didn't she didn't. So this is interesting. We talk about insight. She's been through this. She's had multiple episodes, and she did not have any insight. And I had to like a little strong arm her a little bit. I'm like, look, if you don't let me help you, I'm going to send you back to the hospital. Well, that just made her mad. And she's like, all right. And so she let me do it, but not happy about it. But now she's like, hey, thanks, but she just didn't understand it at the time. But it was beautiful, and it was amazing because she got her life back. And now she's going to go out of state and live on her own with her boyfriend, and she has this incredible job. And I always tell people, I dare anyone to know that she has a brain health condition. That's how well she's doing. And so I told you should be jealous of the work I do because I have the best job ever. It's absolutely wonderful. So there you go.
Thank you, Dr. Mosley. I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation, the information. It's essential because we have people in our world that we care about. So what we're going to do right now is take a break. For those that are online, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back in about 15 minutes, and we'll have our last session for this Community Family Wellness Weekend. Thank you, everyone online and in the audience. Thank you.